I would like to open us with a question. Do you feel special? Do you feel chosen? Do you feel like you singularly feel selected by, out of a group of people, do you feel like the chosen one for any particular thing in your life? Maybe the answer is yes, maybe the answer is no. Can you remember feeling like that in the past, whether it's in adulthood, whether it's as a kid? When was the last time that you felt like that? When did you feel chosen, selected, or special? These Gospels that we have, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, I like to say the Bible's, the books named after dads, they're dad names. They all kind of focus on a number of different things. Mark is very brief. It's the oldest of all of the Gospels, and just kind of rapid fire list the things that happen. The John is the one that is a little out there because it starts like in the beginning. Like it's much more spiritual in its tone. The book of Matthew focuses on a lot of teaching. And before our story today, Matthew jumps pretty quickly into the point in the story that we're going to talk about today, jumps pretty quick to John the Baptist and Jesus's baptism. We've heard a lot of the points before about the birth, baptism, temptation in the wilderness, calling disciples. You've heard descriptions of these events in these different books, but some in more drawn out detail elsewhere in the Gospels. But Matthew jumps right to the teaching. And it is really interesting that about the very first thing that Jesus is recorded preaching to the public. Because he talks about the baptism, but we're going to jump into our story about the Sermon on the Mount. Because he gets tempted after his baptism, and then as he calls his disciples and as he gets started, we're only in Matthew chapter 5, and Matthew's like, okay, we're going to get to the good stuff. Because what happens is a lot of people in their criticism of Christianity thinks that this Jesus guy was maybe just a person who was piggybacking off of some other religious tradition and was interested in saying a bunch of provocative things in order to get famous, and was some sort of snake oil salesman that fooled a lot of people. But what we see here, the first thing that Jesus preaches in public is continuing the message of John the Baptist, where he finds out that his friend is in jail. So when he hears that his friend has been imprisoned, the John the Baptist that baptizes him, he takes up John's mantle and says, he comes out and says, you need to repent, which is to turn and face another direction. Says you need to go a different direction in your life to follow God. So just an important thing to acknowledge as we start is that this guy, this Jesus guy, it's all about what God was doing, not trying to make it about him. Picked up the mantle of his friend and went from there and got some notoriety as he continued kind of in that tradition, and also miracles help in the word of mouth game. So there's a lot going on, and for Jesus at this point, people were afflicted and wondering if they were special. People were wondering if they were chosen, and that gets back to our question at the beginning. Jesus goes up to a mountain where a lot of people were following him because it's actually pretty clear, and we'll talk about this, who's chosen and who's not in that day and age. And so a lot of the people who weren't feeling particularly chosen, not particularly selected, not particularly included with faith, with learning, with God, with being the holy ones, they followed Jesus up to a mountain. And now, this is also in the Old Testament where the majority of encounters with God happen. So your ears would perk up as a listener of this story because of the setting that they're in. Not only that, so you go up to the mountain where you're going to maybe talk to God, maybe pray, whatever you're going to end up doing. You get up there and Jesus sits down. That's the first little piece of information here. It says Jesus sits. And this is not insignificant to the reader because everybody knows that this is how a rabbi teaches. So make no mistake, what's about to be said isn't just mentioned in passing. The original readers or hearers of this story would say, oh man, whatever is said next is what he actually wants his disciples to know, because what your rabbi teaches you is the stuff that he is passing off to you as his students. And all these different people following are like, okay, he's like teaching now. Okay, so what is he going to say? So he goes up to the mountain, the most holy place, and sits, looks at the people there. And since Matthew is known for his teaching, the next chunk of text, the conversations he has while seated up there, is kind of the calling card for the book of Matthew. Matthew chapter 5, Matthew chapter 6. This is some of the stuff that we go back to that book for again and again. And Jesus is in teaching position. He delivers his largest collection of like singular collection of teaching that we have in the entire Bible from Jesus himself there on earth. And it's called the Sermon on the Mount because it's a sermon on a mountain. Apparently, mountain is too long. So they were like, Sermon on the Mountain, that's so much shorter, so much better. So we are going to flip to Matthew chapter 5, right at the beginning. And so here's the big moment. Ready? Here's what Jesus is going to start off with in the holy location as he's ready to teach everybody. He said, chapter 5, verse 3, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called the children of God. And blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when people insult you, persecute you, say falsely all kind of things of evil against you because of me. Rejoice and be glad, because great is your reward in heaven. For in the same way they persecuted the prophets before you." Basically, you're in good company. So here's the moment, this big moment where Jesus is going to tell us what we all need to know. And if you're anything like me, you're like, that's a weird way to start. Right? Like, it's not like, do this, don't do this, or like, hey, let's talk about, salvation. Let's talk about the right way to live. Instead, he comes out and talks about people who are blessed. The opening statement to the Sermon on the Mount is called the Beatitudes, and on the surface, it's a listing of people in certain undesirable life circumstances. It might seem a little bit surprising because you're like, wait a second, they don't seem that blessed to me. And the important thing is this specific Greek word that's used again and again and again. That's the language the New Testament is in, and it is the word makarioi. Makarioi is translated as both blessed and or it's also translated as happy, translated in some places as joyful. So it's sometimes when we talk about the word blessed, we're thinking of like stuff that we have. We think of life circumstances that are going great. You're like, man, what a blessing. Indeed, my 1-month-old, definite blessing. The fact that my 5-year-old loves my 1-month-old, definite blessing, right? It's all going great. Love those 3 hours of sleep. But what we're talking about here with makarioi is, and I won't do the Macarena joke that Pastor Mike likes to do, but hey, makarioi. Okay, I did it. But the point with this is that Jesus is saying, hey, you that are all these different things, the poor in spirit, the ones who are mourning something. I know we have people in here that are mourning this morning. The people who are the pure in heart, the peacemakers, the persecuted, those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. You're not hunger and thirsting because it exists already. People who need some justice to be enacted. These people who need things. Jesus has said, glad you should be glad. Blessed, makarioi, are you. We live in a world where blessed is a colloquialism for a lot of different things. Too blessed to be stressed is a popular bumper sticker. People say stay blessed, just, oh man, just so blessed. Like I was saying, we get the date with the person we're interested in, that's a blessing. We get a raise, that's a blessing. Finish the half marathon we were training for, that's a blessing. Definitely all those things are blessings. Like I said, my kids, blessing. When things are going well, it's easy to feel like we're chosen by God. When things are going well, it's easy to feel makarioi. It's easy to feel joy. It's easy to feel happy because you're like, oh man, that is a blessing. So I am feeling good. I do feel like maybe God's smiling down on me. You reach into those pants pockets, went through the dryer, you pull out $5, like, yes, thanks God, I am chosen. I say that as like a silly example, but like there are times where you feel like somebody's looking out for you. Right? But what about when it's not? It's easy to feel like we're chosen by God when things are going well. But what about when it's not? What about when money is tight and you've worked nights and weekends, or maybe you lost your job, or maybe the cancer came back, or maybe you're having trouble starting a family. Maybe you're having trouble having kids. We got people at lots of different stages of life here this morning. Maybe it's easy to say that God chooses us when we are the ones who feel chosen, but the problem with that perspective lies in the circumstances for those who don't feel like they're the favored ones of God. Right? If all good things are simply God choosing some people and neglecting others, then it's really easy in a difficult season to believe that God is a mean kid with a magnifying glass and you're an ant that didn't quite make the cut. And I believe there are plenty of people, maybe people here have felt that way before. It's a popular perspective and a major reason that people walk away from God. Interestingly enough, that was also the perspective of the religious elite at the time in history in Jesus' life too. There was this idea that if you followed all the rules perfectly, and if you lived a flawless life, and if you were good enough, then God would reward you with blessings. God is like your boss, and you had a particularly fruitful sales quarter, right? In fact, this thinking was so prolific that it was believed that if you were born with a malady, if you were born with a disability, if you were born with an illness, then likely it was because you were experiencing some sort of hardship because you were being punished by God for your sins or the sins of your past family. Basically, if something bad happens to you, well, it's a bummer, but I guess you should have prayed more. I guess your family should have prayed more. We all know that that's completely backwards, and we've talked about this before, but this is the attitude and the mind frame that Jesus is speaking into. And that's why the Beatitudes are so provocative in the way that to start the Sermon on the Mount. Because before Jesus talks about anything that he's going to talk about, and says some more things that surprise people in the Sermon on the Mount. We're going to talk about that over the next 4 weeks. But before he talks about anything, he was letting people know that this message wasn't just for the people that feel chosen, wasn't just for the people who, the religious elite. Because guess what? A lot of the people listening to him that were willing to follow him up on the mountain, they weren't those people. He was saying this message is for everybody. He was letting them know that those people who were counted out by God or who were counted out by everyone else wasn't counted out by the one who truly mattered. Even the people that he's addressing, they had the chance to decide part of the way through. The Sermon on the Mount was likely given in several different kind of chunks, different pieces. And so it's possible that he would have given those in different times. So people are sitting down, maybe from afar going, is this teacher going to say anything that matters to me? And a lot of rabbis might have said at the time, well, this is kind of my niche group of people that I'm interested in talking to, my specific followers. This is my kind of particular perspective. Jesus comes out and says, no, this is for everybody. And notice he's not just listing groups of oppressed people. He's not just like playing to the crowd. He like saw a bunch of people who hunger and thirst for righteousness. He's like, it's for you guys. And then see somebody in like mourning clothes and it's like, also for those who are mourning. You know that he's not just playing the room, because notice that after he lists them, he addresses the core issues that they have and tells them that it's going to be better. This message, the blessed are the people who are mourning because they will be comforted. The meek will not be crushed, but will instead inherit the earth. The ones who have been taken advantage of for being merciful because, people treating you poorly just because you're the nice guy, well, guess what? You're going to be shown mercy instead. Jesus was addressing the core issue of all of these different things. And on and on. I'm wondering if someone feels like they need to be chosen. And I know that we all feel that way. At different points in our days and our lives, in different seasons. This is everywhere in current culture, and there are plenty of examples of stories that are in our cultural narrative where someone is crying out for attention, for approval, to feel chosen by someone else, to be told, you can do it, you did it, great job, I'm proud of you. It's like such an impactful statement. I'm proud of you. There's one example that, for me, that particularly hits home, and it might not be exactly where you expect. So let's take a look. The circumstances of this are that Pam, who is the receptionist at the office, she didn't have anybody show up. She had an art show. This was something she was really interested in. She was depending. She was kind of telling people sheepishly that she was going to do this. She was really proud of what she did. She was trying to show up. She was trying to show up as her authentic self, and it's really hard when it feels like there's a rejection to that, right? So that's why people don't put themselves out there. It's for this exact reason. She has an art show. She is featured, in a kind of a community piece, and nobody from the office shows up. You just feel that ache of what it feels like when you do something and just people don't show. But then one person does. Their goofy boss, Michael, who is just absolutely, he's over the top, he's problematic. There's all the things that you've seen in The Office before. But the important thing about this is that he shows up, and he doesn't just show up. Michael comes strolling in, the last person that you would think would approve of her in a great way, and you could see how surprised she is for the emotion that wells up in her when he looks at you and says, man, I'm so proud of you. This is so good. He was talking about the pieces of it that he loved. Look, there's my car. Is that your car? Oh, that's awesome. There's my window. That's our building. He was celebrating what she did. I think that a lot of times what we need is that kind of approval, that kind of welcome, that kind of somebody telling you that they're proud of you. That's the kind of God that we worship. And that's the attitude of the Beatitudes, this long list of blessings at the beginning, is it's God coming down to earth, writing himself into our story, going, no, this is for you. You who thinks that you're not good enough, or you have even been told that you deserve what's happening to you. No, all the things that I'm about to teach, this stuff is for you. You matter. Blessing, another way to say it for Makarioi, if we think about blessing means that God chooses us, and again, and we get to choose God. Blessing means that God chooses us again and again, and we get to choose Jesus. The Beatitudes are God saying to everyone listening, no matter what you're going through, no matter what you've experienced, you are Makarioi. You are blessed, you are chosen, you matter, and you should feel the joy and the peace that come with that. No matter how you translate that word in a concordance section that helps to define the essential message of these words, Makarioi is something that you receive often. It's a joy that you get. It's not something you don't manufacture Makarioi. The reason that it's translated instead of happy or joyful, the reason that it's translated differently is it's an idea of it's a thing that you receive. It doesn't just happen to you. God actively has to give it to you. And Jesus is saying that God has actively given you blessing. This is not a everyone is special, so no one is special. I'm saying that God chooses you. So many of us, regardless of age and stage of life, are trying to find our place in the world and our jobs, our friends, our families, our hobbies, our passions, in cities or homes that either we've been in our entire life or maybe you've been in it, maybe you're relatively new for. But maybe you've gotten here and like so many before you, you look around at whatever your stage you're in life, whatever your life circumstance is, and you're like, really? This doesn't look or feel like I imagined it would. Things haven't gone exactly as I've planned. That thing that made you special in high school or college or an old job, that automatic community and shared experience of all of that's gone. And so many of us are forced to ask in different stages of life, well, am I still special? Am I still chosen? Am I still the one that, am I still blessed? Am I still Makarioi? Because maybe you listen to my voice now, and if you were to really honestly answer my question, the answer that you would respond is no. I don't feel that way in this stage of life or where I'm at. But while everything in the world might seem to point to the fact that you're just another person working just another job or in just another guy on your street, the God of the universe is still choosing us. The God of the universe is still pursuing us to give us blessing. Blessing means that God chooses us. So, again and again, we get to choose Jesus. God never quits choosing us. The again and again part is for us. Because there's going to be days where you mess it up. There's going to be days where I mess it up. Maybe you also said words you shouldn't say at your dog that got sick as you were headed out the door this morning, right? Like maybe you're somebody who also got frustrated at somebody in traffic. Maybe you're somebody who had a circumstance that you're like, man, I really should have been more on top of that. Maybe you let somebody down. Maybe you're like, man, oh, I missed that birthday. I missed that thing that happened. And man, I guess all that stuff that we talked about at Men of Hope is for everybody else. Because I guess I'm not that one. No. God's still choosing you, so again and again we get to go, okay, yep, I didn't show up the way that I should have to this. Jesus, I'm choosing you. Where are we going? God chooses us, so again and again we get to choose Jesus. Death and brokenness are certainly everywhere. Within the last week, I've done a funeral. I've walked through people with mental health struggles, counseled people through loss who called in with a nighttime emergency on our pastoral care number. Whether it's something that's happened to us or through us, we need someone to conquer the inevitability of all of that brokenness because it's not going to get better. We're not going to turn the corner. I don't care which candidate you're voting for. I don't care who gets elected. I don't care what laws get enacted, what plans get chosen, what different things that happen. Everything doesn't get magically fixed. You can't get fit enough to all of a sudden be excited about every single thing in your life. Guess what? After everything goes right that you've ever dreamed of, you're still going to be bad at the same stuff you were bad at. It's mostly just for me, but maybe it is for you as well. The truth is that we need somebody to conquer that brokenness. We need healing. We need life to counteract death, and that's where Jesus comes in, defeating the power of sin and death. And that's the God that chooses us and says, if you want, you can come with me and we'll go a different way. So let's choose that way this week. Let's recognize as we study the Beatitudes the rest of the month, as you step into the fall season, it's going to feel like fall this week, so it's like a practice. As we step into a fake fall this weekend, use this as an example. Look around and say, can I be blessed? Can I operate in that headspace where I see myself that way? And see how that looks a little different in your life. See how you act a little bit differently. See that the God that chooses you, see what happens when you choose him back. Things just might change. Our discussion questions for the day are as such. Where in life do you feel Makarioi, aka blessed or joyful? Where do you feel that way? Maybe it's at your work. Maybe it's at your house, and you're like, yeah, like things aren't going great at work, but maybe you're like me, and you're like, my 5-year-old thinks I have superpowers. You're like, I feel pretty blessed. That's pretty great. Where in life do you feel blessed? And then where are you missing that? Where is there an area of life you're like, man, I feel like I'm really dragging in this area? And then do you feel that way when it comes to God? Do you feel like God's chosen you, or do you feel like you've just been knocking on God's door and you're like, hey, are you in there? Turns out maybe you've been knocking on the door of something else, because you are certainly chosen. What does it look like for you to step into that this week? Why or why not? What do you need? What have you been waiting for? What are you hoping to see? Work through some of those questions as a group. Thanks for the extra time this morning. I appreciate you. I'm really excited for this series to jump into it. Some of the best teaching that's ever happened is from Jesus in this, and so I can't wait to just steep in that with you all. Grace and peace, friends. Go be good to each other. We'll see you next week.